following the arrest of John Kapoor, the founder of Insys Therapeutics, for conspiring to bribe doctors to prescribe addictive painkillers to patients that didn't need them.
It took 15 days for a federal jury in Boston to find former Insys Therapeutics chairman John Kapoor and 4 other former company executives guilty as part of what prosecutors described as a nationwide conspiracy.
The BBC reported John Kapoor, the former billionaire, was found guilty of racketeering conspiracy for his role in a scheme which also misled insurers. Along the way, Insys Therapeutics had a rap video made to educate their employees on boosting sales for its fentanyl spray, Subsys, an obvious homage paid toward the crack-slinging epidemic of the 1980s into the early 90s.
Bad, well, I'm the baddest. I was created in the lab in the land of the cactus. I'm the man, understand you can't match this, even if you ran and you planned and you practiced.
It became very clear that the opioid crisis, which has killed tens of thousands of Americans, is one of systemic failure brought on by the pharmaceutical kingpin's iron grip on the healthcare industry and Congress.
Do you know of any instances where branded pharmaceutical drug companies paid a generic competitor not to compete as part of a patent settlement?
So patent litigation is part of the Hatch-Waxman.
Do you know of any instances where that's happened?
I know that the Supreme Court has addressed instances where that has been the allegation.
But the American people are being played for chumps, just chumps, paying 4 times the cost for the same drug in another OECD country? We're chumps.
More people in the county are dying due to overdosing on prescription drugs, specifically painkillers.
They're going in, they're saying they have these pains, and then they're turning around and doctors are prescribing them the pain meds.
A woman is admitted to the ER for a prescription pill overdose every 3 minutes. What's more, the number of women dying from prescription pill overdoses jumped 400% between 1999 and 2010.
What did his doctors and healthcare providers say to him?
Basically that he needed to continue to take the medication. And
all of them?
All of them.
When he came home, did he continue to take all the medication?
He followed the doctor's orders.
The next month, Green died in his sleep.
This crisis is being sort of largely overlooked by the general population. People are aware of it, but they're not angry about it in a way that's really commiserate with the scope of what we're facing today. A lot of people have described it to me as sort of what we experienced in the 1980s and 90s when we faced the AIDS epidemic.
MM&M reported, "It's one thing when a drug maker targets a doctor for delivering marketing talks because he or she is a dynamic speaker. It's quite another for the manufacturer to recruit the clinician because they're a high prescriber of a particular brand who can boost sales, sometimes by writing scripts for unapproved uses." Unfortunately, the latter scenario has happened all too often at most major pharma companies. Most have paid fines for such malfeasance and have entered into so-called corporate integrity agreements with the government. But in most cases, there's been no admission of guilt for their promotional stunts. It was almost as if fines for the abuses were simply considered the cost of doing business. It's obvious that pharmaceutical lobbyists have rigged the game, and there's little Congress is willing to do about it other than continue to take their cut. Fortunately, the Trump administration is and has begun doing something about the chaos.
Over the last year, we have mobilized the entire federal government to address this crisis. We have secured $6 billion in new funding to combat opioids, the most money ever received in history.
The irony is the untouchable synthetic drug pushers legally continue their open secret via a bought and paid for U.S. Congress. A whopping $28.5 million to Democrats and Republican candidates in 2018 alone. John Bowne reporting. Somebody stop this republic fueled by bullshit. The Democrats want us all to believe that they are the voice of the American people.
We have to remind Americans we are the party that can deliver for them But we also are the party that will stand up and protect the Constitution and address what is a very real constitutional crisis that this president has put us in.
We need a president who works for all Americans.
Yet they openly despise at least half of the American people.
This time they have an ally. They're a small percentage of the American people, virulent people. Some of them the dregs of society.
You could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
They rail against capitalism while leading a lifestyle of fat cat millionaires on the taxpayer's dime. On the other hand, the neutered Republicans play their part in the never-ending Hegelian dialectic, while the executive office ignores the enforcement of U.S. code upon those that would unravel our country, as if enforcing decades-old laws would appear dictatorial. Mr. President, we the people gave you that power, and we want you to use it. Meanwhile, the Mockingbird media keeps the delusion going.
Amid his feud with Nancy Pelosi, President Trump tweeted out a video of the House Speaker that was edited to make her appear to stammer during a news conference.
Most standard one is to take an image or a video of a person, a candidate, a president, and alter it to make it look like they are saying something that they never said.
That is called deep fakes. In this example, former President Barack Obama's voice has been altered.
Ben Carson is in the sunken place.
The voice behind this video is actor Jordan Peele. The use of altered videos has led U.S. intelligence officials to issue a warning ahead of the 2020 elections. This year's worldwide threat assessment says adversaries and strategic competitors would likely attempt to use deep fakes to influence campaigns in the U.S.
Anybody who is seeing this video in newsfeed, anyone who is going to share it to somebody else, anybody who has shared it in the past, they are being alerted that this video is false. And this is part of the way that we deal with misinformation. We work with internationally certified fact-checking organizations that are independent from Facebook, and we think these are the right organizations to be making decisions about whether something is true or false.
Well, everyone started making...
The political war of words between President Trump and Speaker Pelosi has deteriorated to a level beneath words, comprehensible words at least. That's why we're going to do something different here to make sure you understand just how low the president has stooped in his efforts to smear the Speaker of the House.
And we believe that the President of the United States is engaged in a cover-up.
Just said that I was doing a cover-up. I don't do cover-ups.
Aside from the Democrats and complacent Republicans creating a new precedent reminiscent of the Spanish Inquisition to demonize and investigate and ban anyone that threatens their power, what has Congress accomplished in 2019? Well, so far, they have only enacted 17 laws, only 12 if we subtract the bills related to keeping the government open. One of those changed the address of a post office in Charlottesville, Virginia. Another allows a state to use federal funds to cover a higher percentage of the cost for the construction and expansion of public target ranges. And they designated the outstation of the Department of Veteran Affairs in North Ogden, Utah as the major Brent Taylor Vet Center outstation. Congress passed a law promoting Bob Dole to be colonel in the U.S. Army. Congress also passed the incredibly insignificant law of recognizing achievement in classified school employees. They removed the Agriculture Secretary from the chairmanship of the board of the Future Farmers of America and made it a purpose of the organization to be an integral component of agricultural education. They also sponsored a bill to clarify the grade and pay of podiatrists of the Department of Veteran Affairs. They extended DHS's Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards Program and a law to require the Interior Department to carry out the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan. They also passed the Pesticide Registration Improvement Extension Act of 2018, and who could forget the John D. Dingell Jr. Conservation Management and Recreation Act, which dealt with laws on public lands. Meanwhile, impeachment madness continues to reign supreme, corroding the republic day after day. while the people behind it, who would fare better in an old folks' home or mental institution, refuse to release their geriatric grasp of power to the next generation of American progress.
There are three things. There are three things. There are three things.
Face it, we are being ruled. America no longer functions as a republic. It is a corporocratic globalist combine slowly being usurped by jihad and communism, the very things we were warned about. John Bowne reporting. The finger-pointing amongst the deep state coup minions is taking on feverish proportions. Former FBI Director Jim Comey, former CIA Director John Brennan, and former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper are fumbling with a hot potato of treason not seen in the United States history since the likes of Benedict Arnold. According to sources familiar with the records pertaining to the internal deep state collusion to create an insurance policy to take down newly elected President Trump, indicate that then FBI Director James Comey, according to a late 2016 email chain, told Bureau subordinates that then CIA Director John Brennan insisted the Steele Hillary Clinton dossier be included in the intelligence community assessment on Russian interference.
I do believe it's important that there be an understanding about just how strongly predicated that investigation was. I was there in the summer of 16, and it was very well predicated to launch this counterintelligence investigation about what the Russians were doing to interfere in our election and who among American citizens might have been working with them.
There was no proper predicate. There were no facts to sustain a counterintelligence investigation. And the facts that did exist were made up by the U.S. intelligence community, fed to the FBI through foreign sources, and then used to obtain FISA warrants.
Another massive eye-opener just around the bend is the mounting evidence on former CIA Director and self-proclaimed communist John Brennan's involvement with moving the Steele-Clinton dossier through corrupt channels in Washington, D.C. to attain illegal FISA warrants.
First of all, Mr. Brennan is the primogenitor of this entire plot. All of this started with him insisting that there be an investigation by the FBI into Mr. Trump and his campaign, with no evidence whatsoever. Brennan enlisted the services of foreign intelligence services to assist in planting evidence that would find its way to the FBI and eventually into applications for Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act electronic warrants. Mr. Brennan has become a bit of a nutcase. You can watch him on television. He is insistent. He's belligerent. He really acts like a very guilty man, protesting a bit too much.
Is this president letting our country down?
Well, I think the president has shown a lack of understanding of international affairs, as well as a real ignorance of what it takes to be president of the United States. As mean-spirited, he is dishonest, he has shown a lack of integrity, and he has continued to, I think, demean the office of the presidency.
This type of behavior and actions on the part of foreign tyrants and despots, I never, ever thought that I would see it here in the United States.
Does CIA spy? Yes. Do we spy against our foreign adversaries? Yes. Do we spy against domestic individuals? No, we do not.
They spied on the Trump campaign. They spied on Carter Page. They spied on Papadopoulos. They spied on Sam Clovis. They were spying all over the place, weaponizing the powerful tools of intelligence. By the way, didn't Brennan seem awfully defensive for someone who has done nothing wrong?
Is discovered in the last week, some very fine reporting by John Solomon of The Hill, that made a major memorandum concerning Christopher Steele had been hidden by the FBI from the Inspector General. That memorandum was written by a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, who said, after meeting with her staff, with Christopher Steele, who came in to see them, that he was basically a liar, unreliable, that he had a bias against the president and his campaign, that he wanted to hurt the president, that he helped Hillary Clinton, and that he wanted to get this information out before the election. This woman, the Deputy Assistant Secretary, her name was Kavalek, wrote a memo to the FBI and sent it to them immediately within 24 hours. The FBI, we now know, received it and did nothing about it.
So even with all of the silencing of truth-seeking journalists and an ongoing violation of the premier law of the land, the Democrats still can't avoid the very serious investigation now in the very capable hands of John H. Durham, the United States Attorney in Connecticut, who as a special prosecutor has investigated alleged wrongdoing among national security officials, which included the FBI's ties to the Boston Mafia. And with this mounting nightmare for the Democrats, the pushback will be monumental. John Bowne reporting.
Our subpoenas are not optional.
In what has become an unprecedented partisan abuse of legislative power, the Democrats have made a series of moves intended on undermining the executive office at the expense of the levers of our constitutional republic.
We're some 34 days since the Mueller report was made public. This is the number of days that the Trump administration has been above the law.
The impeachment process is going to be inevitable. It's just a question of when, not if.
My position on impeachment is what it has always been, and that is the President of the United States of America needs to be impeached.
In the epicenter of the madness, Washington, D.C. impeachment zealots are scurrying around the hallowed halls of Congress in a desperate bid to distract the public from the growing panic regarding the Spygate investigation into the Obama administration that could pull the rug out from under the Democrats' chances in the upcoming election.
You look at the origin of the investigation, where it started, how it started, who started it, whether it's McCabe or Comey or a lot of them. The Mueller report, I wish, covered the oranges, how it started.
Just asking about DOJ investigating the origins of the Russia probe. Do you think they'll find anything, any wrongdoing on the part of the Obama administration?
I have no idea what DOJ is doing. Thanks.
Do you have any comment on them exploring the origins of the Russia probe, investigating the investigators? Do you think it's a worthy cause to do that?
I'm not commenting. Thank you.
Let's remember who Mr. Barr is. Let's examine his conduct, and let's treat his statements in this new investigation for what they really are. Treat them like Trump re-election campaign press releases, because that's what this is about.
But what do you do
This is about
it?
distracting from... Well, we need the media to be sure that they point this out, that this is an attorney general who is clearly acting like President Trump's own Roy Cohen, who thinks he's there to defend the president.
Associated Press reports President Donald Trump granted Attorney General William Barr new powers to review and potentially release classified information related to the origins of the Russia investigation. Trump explicitly delegated Barr with declassification power, noting it would not automatically extend to another Attorney General, and only for use in the review of the Russia investigation. Before using the new authority, Barr should consult with intelligence officials to the extent he deems it practicable.
The concern from Democrats seems to be that Barr can't be trusted and there might be selective release of information. Does that pretty much sum up the worry about him?
Yeah, that's a fair concern. I mean, when you have someone else who's outside their organization now able to say, for whatever reason, I'm going to now it's declassified, but also potentially make it public, that's very scary to other intelligence agencies.
Outside of Washington, D.C., congressional state Democrats are wreaking havoc on the future of the presidential election, whether their constituents want it or not. 18 states are considering bills that would require presidential candidates to disclose their taxes in order to be on the 2020 election ballot. Out of those 18 states, only Vermont would require candidates for governor and other statewide offices to disclose at least part of their tax returns. The Democrats creating legislation that only applies to others, not to their own corrupt tax returns. Meanwhile, as the Washington Times reports, the Nevada Senate approved a national popular vote bill. The bill intends on undermining the Electoral College and now goes to Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak's desk. Assembly Bill 186 would bring Nevada into the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Nevada would become the 16th jurisdiction to join the compact. along with 14 states and the District of Columbia. The 2020 presidential election is shaping up to be a complete mess. John Bowne reporting. Meanwhile, back on Bizarro World.
In not very long time, you make choice for president. Bizarro asks you to not vote Bizarro. Losing is winning. Help Bizarro win. Don't vote Bizarro.
Paid for by the people not supporting, therefore in support of Bizarro.
The delusions on the campaign trail are flailing around with a mounting flagrant disregard for truth after a significant portion of Trump's support was deplatformed by naked totalitarianism in Silicon Valley.
They have 25 people now running for the office of president, and some of these people are stone cold crazy.
I've known what I wanted to do since I was in second grade.
You wanted to be president?
I wanted to be a public school teacher. Can we hear it for our public?
Recently, Joe Biden, who is now leading in the polls, wholeheartedly agreed with the sheer nonsense spewing from a supporter mired in mainstream conspiracy theories and propagandized fear-mongering.
I have a very severe case of what's called Trump derangement syndrome. He's failing in carrying out the most basic function to uphold the Constitution. He is not defending our national security. He has no interest in doing it. I don't want to live in a country run by Vladimir Putin. He's an illegitimate president in my mind. That's it. I think all the talk about impeachment and what the Democrats should do, that's fine. It's theoretical at this point. Let them investigate. Let them subpoena. Let them go to the Supreme Court. He's illegitimate. And my biggest fear is that he's going to do it again with the help of Vlad, his best pal, and we're going to be stuck for 6 more years with this guy. And that is terrifying. It's terrifying.
Would you be my vice presidential candidate? Folks, look, I absolutely agree.
What Biden's supporters will soon learn is that Biden is far more embedded in the dark world of pay-to-play foreign collusion than President Trump could ever be.
Joe Biden literally leveraged $1 billion taxpayer dollars, demanding in 6 hours that a prosecutor investigating his own son gets fired as a result of his connections to this energy company. Here's the tape.
We're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said, I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired.
Democrats again rallied around their retelling of obstruction and Watergate-esque fantasies, reading the Mueller report in a marathon display of denial.
Redaction, grand jury, redaction, grand jury.
Well, maybe now, after poring over it for 12 hours, they have come to terms with the fact that after 2 years of their pseudo-patriotic, republic-crippling, fraudulent-based witch hunt, there was no collusion or obstruction of the Russian collusion fantasy. But that still won't stop the madness of the Democratic-led House from pushing an LGBTQ equality bill that will ultimately strip away the civil rights of average Americans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I rise to support H.R. 5, the Equality Act. I have to stop for a second and take in this momentous occasion, for I have the honor of being on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives speaking in favor of a bill that I've worked on for the past 5 years that will finally give full legal equality to the LGBTQ community here in America. This is truly historic.
The bill harms people in so many ways, destroying safe spaces for women, undermining women-owned businesses, intimidating the free exercise of conscience. But let me concentrate on one aspect, the destructive impact it has on women's sports. Wherever these laws are imposed, biological males have begun to dominate women's competitions.
A, quote, perception or belief, even if inaccurate, of suspected discrimination. A perception or belief, even if inaccurate, of suspected discrimination. How can we write legislation like this?
Meanwhile, President Trump, for better or worse, still connects with the American dream in all of its ragged glory.
They have a $100 trillion Green New Deal. Nobody has any idea what the hell it is. They know that you can't take a plane anymore. You have to take a train to Hawaii. Train.
John Bowne reporting. Sure, 5G means more devices at megafast speeds, low delays, and your personal files will instantly pop out of the cloud. But the 5G rollout is rife with so many issues threatening human health and civil liberties that it's simply easier for the Mockingbird media to sell you a stack of positives rather than address the mountain of negatives.
Self-driving cars, smart cities, fully connected homes, robots. This is the future, and it will be powered by 5G. 5G signals are powerful, but they don't reach as far. Making it work will require thousands, maybe even millions of mini cell phone towers pretty much everywhere you can imagine. Every lamppost, the side of every building, maybe even in every room of your home.
Self-driving cars, for example, require a continuous stream of data. The quicker that information is delivered to autonomous vehicles, the better and safer they can run.
For many analysts, this is just one example of how 5G could become the connective tissue for the Internet of Things, an industry that's set to grow threefold by 2025, linking and controlling not just robots, but also medical devices, industrial equipment, and agricultural machinery.
Meanwhile, the federal government just signs off on big tech's blank check. They will just deal with the repercussions later. Why not? Congress is so unaccountable. Liability is at an all-time joke level. Why not let a massive unknown potential health threat spread itself throughout every city and suburb across the United States?
The only way we have a deployable, secure 5G system is either with Nokia, Ericsson, Samsung, or some combination of them. American telecom companies are playing and will play a central role in the deployment of 5G, both in the United States and globally. But in terms of developing affordable and deployable equipment sets, we've got to work closely with trusted allies.
Coming to a street lamp near you, right? 300,000 of them are going to sprout up in the United States. And preliminary studies from National Toxicology Program looking at 2G and 3G look like it can possibly cause heart tumors and brain tumors in rats, not people, mind you, rats, but change cells in the brain and cause ringing in the ears. So we don't know the long-term health risks, and I'm not willing to take that off the table, especially since 5G is closer to you because it's faster and it's higher definition, but it doesn't travel as far. So I need to see longer-term studies on this.
Why is 5G a risk? 5G is ultra-high frequency and intensity, which is further compounded by the millimeter waves that don't travel through objects or as far as 4G or 3G. Add to that, more mini cell towers must be installed because the current cell towers can't accommodate 5G. As RadiationHealthRisks.com writes, it is estimated that they will need a mini cell tower every 2 to 8 houses. This will greatly increase our RF radiation exposure. All cell towers emit radio frequency radiation. This is what makes them dangerous. 5G can support up to 1 million devices per square kilometer, while 4G supports only up to 100,000 devices per square kilometer. With RF radiation, how close the source is to our physical bodies is more important than the power level or wattage of the radiation. RF radiation dissipates with distance. In other words, a low-powered exposure right next to someone is more dangerous than a more powerful exposure a long ways away. Also, the longer the exposure time is, the more dangerous it is. 5G will be the worst of both worlds. We will have more sources around us and closer to us, and there will be more powerful and continuous emissions. One solution: you can invest in a Wi-Fi router guard. A Wi-Fi router guard will block between 90 and 95% of the RF radiation that your router emits. John Bowne reporting. You can always find us at dailynewscollective.com, at blablahshow.com, on YouTube at JonBownePolitix, on gab.ai at JonBownePolitix, and Twitter at NewsBound.